Part 3 of The Man That Corrupted Hadleyburg by Mark Twain. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Leonard Wilson.
The town hall had never looked finer. The platform at the end of it was backed by a showy draping of flags. At intervals along the walls were festoons of flags. The gallery fronts were clothed in flags. The supporting columns were swathed in flags. All this was to impress the stranger, for he would be there in considerable force, and in a large degree he would be connected with the press. The house was full. The 412 fixed seats were occupied, also the 68 extra chairs which had been packed into the aisles. The steps of the platform were occupied. Some distinguished strangers were given seats on the platform. At the horseshoe of tables which fenced the front and sides of the platform sat a strong force of special correspondents who had come from everywhere. It was the best-dressed house the town had ever produced. There were some tolerably expensive toilets there, and in several cases the ladies who wore them had the look of being unfamiliar with that kind of clothes. At least the town thought they had that look, but the notion could have arisen from the town's knowledge of the fact that these ladies had never inhabited such clothes before. The gold sack stood on a little table at the front of the platform where all the house could see it. The bulk of the house gazed at it with a burning interest, a mouth-watering interest, a wistful and pathetic interest. A minority of 19 couples gazed at it tenderly, lovingly, proprietarily, and the male half of this minority kept saying over to themselves the moving little impromptu speeches of thankfulness for the audience's applause and congratulations, which they were presently going to get up and deliver. Every now and then one of these got a piece of paper out of his vest pocket and privately glanced at it to refresh his memory. Of course there was a buzz of conversation going on. There always is. But at last, when the Reverend Mr. Burgess rose and laid his hand on the sack, he could hear his microbes gnaw, the place was so still. He related the curious history of the sack, then went on to speak in warm terms of Hadleyburg's old and well-earned reputation for spotless honesty, and of the town's just pride in this reputation. He said that this reputation was a treasure of priceless value, that under Providence its value had now become inestimably enhanced, for the recent episode had spread this fame far and wide, and thus had focused the eyes of the American world upon this village, and made its name for all time, as he hoped and believed, a synonym for commercial incorruptibility. Applause. And who is to be the guardian of this noble fame? The community as a whole? No, the responsibility is individual, not communal. From this day forth each and every one of you is, in his own person, its special guardian, and individually responsible that no harm shall come to it. Does each of you accept this great trust? Tumultuous assent. Then all is well. Transmit it to your children and to your children's children. To-day your purity is beyond reproach. See to it that it shall remain so. To-day there is not a person in your community who could be beguiled to touch a penny not his own. See to it that you abide in this grace. We will, we will. This is not the place to make comparisons between ourselves and other communities, some of them ungracious toward us. They have their ways, we have ours. Let us be content. Applause. I am done. Under my hand, my friends, rests a stranger's eloquent recognition of what we are. Through him the world will always henceforth know what we are. We do not know who he is, but in your name I utter your gratitude and ask you to raise your voices in endorsement. The house rose in a body and made the walls quake with the thunders of its thankfulness for the space of a long minute. Then it sat down, and Mr. Burgess took an envelope out of his pocket. The house held its breath while he slit the envelope open and took from it a slip of paper. He read its contents slowly and impressively, the audience listening with tranced attention to this magic document, each of whose words stood for an ingot of gold. "The remark which I made to the distressed stranger was this: 'You are very far from being a bad man. Go and reform.'" Then he continued, "We shall know in a moment now whether the remark here quoted corresponds with the one concealed in the sack, and if that shall prove to be so, and it undoubtedly will, this sack of gold belongs to a fellow citizen who will henceforth stand before the nation as the symbol of the special virtue which has made our town famous throughout the land, Mr. Billson." The house had gotten itself all ready to burst into the proper tornado of applause, but instead of doing it, it seemed stricken with a paralysis. There was a deep hush for a moment or two, then a wave of whispered murmurs swept the place of about this tenor: "Billson? Oh, come, this is too thin. $20 to a stranger, or anybody. Billson? Tell it to the Marines." And now at this point the house caught its breath all of a sudden in a new access of astonishment, for it discovered that whereas in one part of the hall Deacon Billson was standing up with his head meekly bowed, in another part of it Lawyer Wilson was doing the same. There was a wondering silence now for a while. Everybody was puzzled, and 19 couples were surprised and indignant. Billson and Wilson turned and stared at each other. Billson asked bitingly, "Why do you rise, Mr. Wilson?" "Because I have a right to. Perhaps you will be good enough to explain to the House why you rise." "With great pleasure, because I wrote that paper." "It's an impudent falsity. I wrote it myself." It was Burgess's turn to be paralyzed. He stood looking vacantly at first one of the men and then the other, and did not seem to know what to do. The house was stupefied. Lawyer Wilson spoke up now and said, "I ask the chair to read the name signed to that paper." That brought the chair to itself, and it read out the name: "John Wharton Billson." "There!" shouted Billson. "What have you got to say for yourself now? And what kind of apology are you going to make to me and to this insulted house for the imposture which you have attempted to play here?" "No apologies are due, sir. And as for the rest of it, I publicly charge you with pilfering my note from Mr. Burgess and substituting a copy of it, signed with your own name. There is no other way by which you could have gotten hold of the test remark. I alone of living men possess the secret of its wording." There was likely to be a scandalous state of things if this went on. Everybody noticed with distress that the shorthand scribes were scribbling like mad. Many people were crying, "Chair! Chair! Order! Order!" Burgess rapped his gavel and said, "Let us not forget the proprieties due. There has evidently been a mistake somewhere, but surely that is all. If Mr. Wilson gave me an envelope, and I remember now that he did, I still have it." He took one out of his pocket, opened it, glanced at it, looked surprised and worried, and stood silent a few moments. Then he waved his hand in a wandering and mechanical way, and made an effort or two to say something, then gave it up despondently. Several voices cried out, "Read it! Read it! What is it?" So he began in a dazed and sleepwalker fashion. "The remark which I made to the unhappy stranger was this: 'You are far from being a bad man.'" The house gazed at him, marveling. "Go and reform." Murmurs. "Amazing! What can this mean?" "This one," said the chair, "is signed Thurlow G. Wilson." "There!" cried Wilson. "I reckon that settles it. I know